We do begin the ReidOut tonight with the reckoning that's looming for Donald Trump now that a grand jury has been impaneled in New York. But first, let's revisit the curious case of Steve Bannon, Trump's former campaign strategist. Remember him? Scraggly hair, patchy face, bragged about making Breitbart the home of the white nationalist alt-right. In many ways, Bannon was the architect of the Trump iteration of the America First brand, the so-called economic nationalism grounded in anti-immigrant, back to the early 20th century working-class culture war politics that put Trump in office back in 2016. And he's capitalized on that accomplishment to become a leading voice of the extreme right. Last August, Bannon was arrested aboard a not-so-working-class 150-foot yacht off the coast of Connecticut and charged with conspiracy counts of fraud and money laundering. That's because he and some friends had allegedly schemed to defraud hundreds of thousands of donors, claiming 100% of their money would be used to build Trump's promised border wall that Trump had promised Mexico would pay for. Instead, the indictment says that Bannon and friends siphoned the money off for their own personal use, scamming Trump supporters to enrich himself. In other words, Bannon preyed on the very same disaffected working-class voters that he and Trump claim to represent. Of course, Trump doesn't care about those people any more than Bannon does. He pardoned Bannon in the final hours of his presidency, not so much Bannon's fellow defendants who still face federal fraud charges or the hundreds of Trump diehards who stormed the Capitol and now face possible prison time. Now let's fast forward to this week, when the judge in Bannon's case reluctantly dismissed the indictment against him. Notably, she cited the precedent that a pardon implies guilt, because if there be no guilt, there is no ground for forgiveness. In other words, acceptance of a pardon may imply a confession of guilt. So yeah, Bannon scammed those Trumpers. Now, let's take a moment to remember that a presidential pardon only covers federal crimes. It cannot protect a would-be defendant from state charges. And it just so happens that a state probe of Bannon's alleged fraud still looms. The Manhattan DA, Cyrus Vance, reportedly picked up where federal prosecutors left off, along with New York Attorney General Letitia James, who teamed up on the case. Now, if that sounds familiar, that's because they've also been investigating Donald Trump and his company for criminal fraud. And as we reported last night, Vance has now assembled a grand jury to weigh potential charges. In other words, it's fallen on New York to not only clean up the mess that Trump's business left in his wake, but that of his associates, too. Now, we've known that Trump has long been a professional scam artist, even before he entered politics. The irony here is that had Bannon not been so successful running his 2016 campaign, Trump might never have been president and might not have attracted the kind of scrutiny that he's now under. By winning the presidency, which since Nixon has come with a tradition of showing your taxes, you might say he drew the eye of Sauron onto himself. At the same time, also thanks in part to Bannon's help, Trump has millions of fanatical cult followers who are willing to believe anything he says. Just consider that a majority of Republicans, 53% of them, believe the big lie that Trump actually won the election and that he, and not Joe Biden, is the true president of the United States. They've gulped down the Kool-Aid to become willing participants in Trump's grift. Their gullibility is now part of Trump's defense. He's using his voters as cover in a vain attempt to escape accountability. Reacting to the news at the grand jury last night, Trump said, quote, "This is an affront to the almost 75 million voters who supported me in the presidential election." Really, Donald? Because the potential crimes under scrutiny have nothing to do with the presidency. They arise from Donald Trump's private business dealings before he was even president. But that's the latest extension of the big lie that prosecutors and now the country must now grapple with in order to see that justice is done.